Welcome to this module of Professor Messer's free CompTIA A+ certification training course. I'm James Messer, and in this module, we're going to talk about dealing with errors. Errors is something as a CompTIA professional you're going to run into a lot. You'll be asked to solve problems, and in our CompTIA requirements on the 220-601 exam, section 3.3, we need to understand how to recognize and resolve common operational issues. We also need to explain common error message and codes. Both the 220-601 and 220-602 exams are very similar in this regard, although the 220-602 exam expects you to go into a little bit more detail about exactly how to fix the problem. So we're going to do all of that today. We're going to learn about these problems, and we're going to learn about how to fix these problems. In this module, we're going to learn about boot errors and startup problems, a little bit different scenarios in both of those things, but ultimately it means that our Windows desktop is not starting up. We'll also talk about, once Windows gets going, what you can find in the event viewer. We'll talk about the Windows Registry and how it's used to solve problems, and we'll also discuss Windows error reporting, which is some automated capabilities within Windows that might help solve problems in the future. Let's start with Windows error messages. These boot errors that pop up are things when you first turn your computer on and you get a message that you can't even find a Windows directory, a Windows partition, any operating system whatsoever in your system. So these types of problems are bad. These are very bad problems because if our Windows is completely gone, this is a very major type of issue. Something very dramatic has happened. These problems are usually very specific, though. They're giving you very specific information about what it thinks the problem might be. And if you understand exactly the process that takes place when you start your machine, then you can kind of figure out exactly where these problems are going wrong. If you aren't quite sure about that process, there's another one of our videos you can watch that talks about the boot process. And that's a very important one when dealing with these types of issues. Fortunately, there's relatively few things that can go wrong at this level. You either find the Windows directory or you don't find the Windows directory, and there's only a few reasons why something like that might not work. The Windows Recovery Console is going to be a big part of this. This is a recovery console that allows us to get into our Windows environment and at least change some things on the hard drive itself. So we can practice now before things really get bad. And if you have your Windows installation media, that's what you should do on your system too. Make sure you have a backup. You can pop these things in. You can step through a number of the things that we're doing on our system today. Just make sure you understand as we go through this that a number of these things that we're going to do can delete information on your drive. So don't do this on your production drive, especially if you haven't done a backup. You want to be very certain of what you're doing here. A number of these things that we do, there is no going back. So be sure that you understand when you type in a command exactly what that command is going to do, and understand that you could break things very easily. Here are a number of errors that you might get if you first turn your computer on and it's not able to really even see the partition on the hard drive where our Windows operating system exists. This may be because the drive itself isn't being seen, or it may be that it's found the drive in our system, but for some reason, the part of the partition table that tells it to boot this Windows from this directory has a problem. This can happen sometimes if a virus gets on the system. It can corrupt some of those partition tables. So these boot sector errors we might get: invalid partition table. It tells you that the disk is there. It sees that a drive exists in your system, but the table itself is not making sense. So it's saying that's invalid. An error loading the operating system, another circumstance where it has gone to the drive, it's ready to start up, and that first partition, that first boot sector says there's nothing here to boot. We may be missing an operating system not found. These are very similar errors, notice. And what you're going to find is as you move from BIOS to BIOS, as different versions are in your system, you will see that the errors might be a little bit different between them, even if it's the same type of problem. But if you notice that it's not finding an operating system, it's not seeing a partition table that makes any sense, then we might think that perhaps we do have a problem with the boot sectors on that drive, and we may need to repair those. Rebuilding the boot sector, fortunately, is a relatively simple process as long as you have your Windows installation media. There were a number of ways to do this in the past, but now that we've gotten past the idea of running these command line based operating systems, it's a little bit more involved to get this going now. What you'll need is your installation media, and we're going to run the Windows Recovery Console to be able to do this. Another important thing to remember is that if we're going to get into this system and make these configuration changes from your recovery console, you will need your administrator password. So make sure you understand the administrator password for that machine. Otherwise, you may be in a position where you can't save anything on the drive. You're just going to need to reinstall the operating system. And very often you don't want that to happen. The command that we'll use once we get into the recovery console is this command, fix boot. And we'll fix boot to the drive that needs to be recovered. Very often our hard drive is C:. So let's try that now and see what happens. To demonstrate this, I'm using VMware Workstation, which allows me to have this virtual computer inside my desktop here and allows me to demonstrate this. I've also inserted virtually an image of my Windows installation media. So on your computer, you take your real CD, you put it into your CD drive, then you turn the computer on. So I'm going to do all of that virtually. We'll hit our power button on this virtual device. When this starts up, it's going to say that there's a disk installed, and if you'd like to boot from that disk, you need to press a key. And we're going to get that message and we're going to press our key and it's going to start the Windows installation process as if we were installing this for the very first time. Now remember, we're not going to install this for the first time. Our problem is that the partition table might be corrupted. So we're going to start the recovery console. It's going to go through its normal process of loading the files that it needs to load drivers, disk drivers, and other things that we need to use our keyboard and our mouse. And then the Windows setup program is going to give us some options. The first option will be to install some Windows, and we don't want to do that. We want to go to the recovery console. The recovery console we use to repair a Windows XP installation, and it says we want to press R. Now we could of course get out of here completely. If we're not certain what's going on, just press F3 and you'll be removed from this completely. What we'd like to do is continue to the recovery console. We're going to press R. Our Windows Professional Setup takes us to this recovery console screen. Notice it goes black and it says, this is the console that you're going to use to recover this system. You need to know which installation of Windows it's going to recover from. So as long as it can read something on that drive, it's going to find that Windows directory. So this is good if we're worrying about not seeing an operating system and we're worried that maybe it's just the partition table. At least now our recovery console can see information on that drive. So this is a good thing. We'll hit the 1 button because it's the only Windows installation we have on that disk. We would have a list of others if there were others on there. It's going to access that and then it'd ask you for the administrator password. Again, you'll have to have that administrator password if you want to continue with this process. Once we put our password in and hit enter, it takes you to a command prompt, C:\Windows. And in fact, if we do a directory, we can even rest a little better because we know that it can see files on that drive and everything appears to be there at least. Now what we need to do is tell our C drive that we would like to restore or recover that partition table there. We're going to fix the boot partition of this C drive. And that's the command, fix boot C:. And if I hit enter, it says, are you sure you want to write a new boot sector to the C partition? And so it's even telling you we're going to make some changes here, and these changes are probably what you want, but they're going to be very dramatic. We're going to overwrite what's currently in that boot sector. If there are other operating systems on this drive, maybe you have a Linux partition, you have other Windows partitions on here, and you want to be sure that you don't run into any problems, you may want to back up the drive first. So what we're going to do is say, yes, we are absolutely sure that we would like to do that. We hit the Y button and hit enter. It says the file system on the startup partition is NTFS. Fix boot is writing a new boot sector, and now the new boot sector is successfully written. At this point, we would take our CD-ROM out, we will restart our machine, and now our new partition table will point to our Windows directory and everything should start up normally. So that's a very easy way to use that recovery console to fix some of these problems you might run into with boot partitions. Let's say that we're not having a problem with a boot partition. Let's say that it's finally getting to load Windows and it gives these types of message saying a disk read error has occurred, or our NT loader file is missing, or our NT loader file is compressed for some reason on our drive. As you might recall from our video that talks about the boot process, that NT loader file is incredibly important in the boot process. It does a number of things during that startup process. And if for some reason you manage to get to the root directory of your drive and somehow it was corrupted, there was a problem, it was removed, these are not things you can do normally, by the way. It's very much a protected system file that you can't just hit the delete button on. Probably a third-party tool. Perhaps you tried loading a separate operating system and it removed files that were in the root directory of that drive. So what this is going to allow us to do, if we go through the process of back to our recovery console and starting that process up, we can fix those boot files. So we're going to go to our XP installation media and simply copy over the files from our CD. They're exactly the same on our CD as they are on the hard drive. So if the ntloader and ntdetect.com files are having a problem on our hard drive, we just want to copy them over, this is a very easy way to do it. There's also a possibility that your boot.ini file might be corrupted. As you may recall, the boot.ini file directs your operating system during the load process to go to the proper directory and start Windows up. And if it doesn't know where to go, then you're going to get an odd message about Windows not being able to start. Well, the boot.ini file is a pretty cryptic file if you look at it. There's a lot of information in there. And so one of the things you can do is run this bootcfg command that will look at the drive, determine where the Windows might be, and rebuild the boot.ini for you so that it's relatively seamless and something you don't have to worry about building from scratch, because that's a very difficult thing to go through. So you've got some commands for bootcfg that can list, add, or rebuild. Let's run through a troubleshooting scenario and I'll show you what I mean. Whenever you lose the ntloader file, you get an error message that pops up that says it's having a problem loading that. And you'll see here's the message. I just started my virtual machine and it said almost immediately, extremely quickly, ntloader is missing. Because ntloader is one of the first things that loads whenever Windows starts up. And it says press Ctrl-Alt-Delete to restart, as if that's going to help us in this scenario. Without ntloader, we're not going to get very far. So let's start the Windows Recovery Console again, and let's go in and see how to do this. Since we already know how to start the Recovery Console, we'll skip that part again and we'll go straight to the command line of the Recovery Console and figure out what we can do from there. We've now put our installation media in. We have started from that installation media. We've chosen the R for Recovery Console, and we put in our administrator password. And here we are at the command prompt here. Now, the ntloader file is stored in the root directory of our C drive, and you can see it takes us to the Windows directory. So the command that I'd like to run is cd /. That changes directory to the directory we've specified right afterwards, which is just the root directory, the / directory. And if we type a dir for directory and look through the files that are in this root directory, we can see there is no ntloader anywhere in this list. So that command, that error message that we're getting when we start up that says ntloader isn't found, that's why it's not there. So we need to recover or restore that ntloader file from the installation media. Now, fortunately, it's saved on that installation media. If I type a dir and a d:, which says I want to see the directory of my D drive, which is my installation media, we can see that everything that we would expect to see on that install CD is there. There's a directory there called i386 that stands for Intel 386. And that is the directory that holds all of the files that we need to start up our Windows XP workstation setup program. And inside of there is also a copy of ntloader. So we're going to run a copy command here that will copy from d:// i386 a file called ntloader. And this copies it right from our CD and stores it into wherever we happen to be on our hard drive right now, which is the root of our C drive. And if we hit enter, it says that one file was copied. And if I do another dir of my local drive here, notice that now in my root of my C drive, ntloader does exist. So the real test is going to be, does ntloader really work? If we hit the exit, type exit and hit enter, it's going to restart our installation process, our boot process, and now the ntloader message is gone. I now am loading Windows normally exactly as I would expect to, because now I have the ntloader file that Windows needs to get everything up and running again, and now our system is working exactly as we would expect. Well, just because we fixed our boot partition or we fixed our ntloader files for Windows doesn't mean we're out of the woods. We still have a number of errors and things that can happen right after we log in. So once our Windows starts up and we have these login process, there are a number of applications that run, a number of services that run, and they might pop up these weird messages that say unknown hard error, and it's coming from a system error. It's very difficult to know exactly what application that might be coming from. Sometimes we can go into our event log. It might tell us more information, but sometimes you just don't know exactly where that's coming from, and it's difficult to figure out where along this process of installing programs onto your machine did something go awry. Well, we can also go to Google. Sometimes somebody else is having exactly the same problem, and you can either work together to solve the problem, or perhaps they've already found the solution. So somebody else may have already seen this particular issue, and you can start troubleshooting to see if you can find out why it might be happening on your system. There's also a program called msconfig. msconfig is a program that will show you what's running during the startup process on your machine. And you can individually select and deselect items so that the next time you boot up, you'll know exactly what's running. Microsoft used to have a program called BootViz, which gave you visibility into the boot process. It's no longer supported. Microsoft has actually removed that from their website. It gave you a lot of detail about the underlying architecture of Windows and exactly what was happening during what time frame. It gave some very nice graphs and information about at what time during the boot up process did certain files begin to run. But because that's not supported anymore, you can't download it from Microsoft. Fortunately, it still exists. The internet's a big place, and you may still be able to find it for download on a number of sites, but make sure you use that at your own risk, since Microsoft isn't going to help you if something goes wrong. The msconfig program can really help you. Let's go to the Start menu. I'll choose Run, and we'll type msconfig and hit Enter. The msconfig program is relatively straightforward. There are a number of tabs. There's a general tab that talks about doing a normal startup, a diagnostic startup, and then a selective startup of exactly what you'd like to start your system with. And you can see with these tabs that are in here, you can change, add, and remove different items, including information that's in your boot.ini file. I mentioned earlier that the boot.ini file is these odd little things that are in here. You can see why this would be difficult to rebuild on your own. The services command here, we talk about going into loading different services behind the scenes when Windows XP starts up. This is just a list of just a few of them. And as you can see, we can manually enable and disable different commands or services from running during that startup process. Once the services are running, there's also separate programs that might run on your desktop automatically, and they run from different locations in the registry. So you can not only see here what items they are during the startup process and what executables are running during that time frame, but you can also see where in the registry that's coming from. So if you wanted to go in and manually edit your registry, you'd know exactly where to go to find those things. msconfig also allows you to, from this centralized front end, allow you to jump into some other tools as well. For instance, if you wanted to go right here to the registry editor, you wouldn't have to type anything else in. You just select it and choose Launch, and it will launch the registry editor process. If you've seen these errors pop up while you're booting your system, you're watching things go on, you're going to want to go back in time and see if you can figure out what was going on during that time frame. This is especially useful if you're showing up at someone's desk and they said, I had a problem last week during the boot process that might have something to do with this. Maybe we could look at that. The event viewer is going to have a wealth of this information there. Occasionally, it can be almost overwhelming. There's a lot of information here. And so sometimes it might even point you down a direction and give you messages about errors or warnings that might have nothing to do with what you're doing, and in fact may be completely invisible to what you're doing. It may not even be part of your problem. What it does help you do is piece together what's happened in the past. You can see when programs have been installed. You can see when programs have been removed. You can see what happens during the boot process. It really is a written chronicle of what's been going on your system. And you can use that to go back and see what's going on, either sitting in front of the workstation itself, or you could be on a workstation that's somewhere else. And you can connect to an event viewer remotely to see what's in that event log. It makes it very easy. You can sit at your desk and see what's happening in another machine somewhere across the country if you'd like to, as long as you're connected through the network. So you don't have to get up from your desk and go somewhere else. You can really do a lot of this remotely. Let's have a look at the event viewer, and I'll give you an idea of some of the things you can see when you step through the different pieces of this chronicle. The event viewer is an administrative tool that you get to from your control panel. So under your Start menu, let's choose Settings Control Panel. And inside of your control panel is going to be administrative tools. We're going to select those administrative tools. And within that list of admin tools is the event viewer. Now, you may also recall that you can get to the event viewer from your computer management screen, which you can either start here, or a quick shortcut, if My Computer is available, you can right mouse click on My Computer and choose Manage. From this computer management console, you can then connect to a remote event viewer, or you can start up the event viewer that's local. This also immediately gives you access to a lot of the other tools in your system, such as the services and some of your disk information. So you can see here the event viewer is the first thing at the very top. There are only 4 event viewers on this particular system, and that is the default. But you'll find if you go to other servers, domain servers and other enterprise type servers, there may be other event logs that are also stored in here. So don't be surprised if you see something other than these 4. There's an application event viewer, and an Internet Explorer event viewer, a security event viewer, and a system event viewer. The system usually has the largest amount of information. It's going to tell you what's happened over time, what types of devices have run, what has started up. I'm going to page through. You can start to see some of those. And if you choose any of them, we'll choose this one right here and double click, it will pop up a message that tells you a lot about what that particular event had in it. The date, the time, the source, the program that started this event, that put this event in here, the computer that had it here, and it's talking about a Symantec antivirus mini filter was successfully loaded. And you can see down at the bottom, there's a list of bytes and information associated with this event. If you're ever in a situation where technical support is telling you, is there anything in the event log associated with this? This is where you'd start to see some of these things. And fortunately, you can click one button to copy this information and it goes right into your clipboard. So then you can open up an email message or a notepad, copy that information in, and then email that off so that someone can assist you with some of the problems you might see in the event log. Once you talk with technical support about a problem, very often they'll say, oh, there's a fix for this. You just need to make a change to the registry on that computer. You'll see this a lot on the Microsoft knowledge base where they'll say, to work around this problem, make this registry change. But they also say, if you're going to change the registry, you ought to know that you could break something very, very easily. So make sure you don't make these changes unless you're very sure what you're doing. And of course, you can back up information in the registry and restore it very easily as well. There's a built-in option in the registry that allows you to save a section of the registry called a hive. Each section of the registry or portions of the registry, you can save those hives off and then even restore those hives very easily to your system. So that way you may want to make a quick backup before you make any big changes. It's also extremely easy. When you hit the delete button in the registry, it just deletes it immediately. There's no going back. There's no undos associated with that. You can delete huge sections of the registry very, very easily. And I only mention this because I have deleted huge sections of the registry very, very easily and not really meant to do that. I've had to do installations of the operating system all over again because I completely removed huge sections that I really wasn't intending to. So be very careful. Always have a backup of this information. Always have a backup of what's on your hard drive. I can't really say it enough, can I? If you recall from using that MS config program, we were able to start the registry editor just by selecting it and clicking one button. But on the test, you may be asked, how do you start the registry editor from the command line? And you do that by clicking the Start option, choosing the Run, and typing in regedt 32. This starts our registry editor. It's a 32-bit mode registry editor that comes fully loaded into your Windows XP desktop. And if we hit enter, you'll see it launches this editing front end. Now, on the left side of the registry editor is a listing of the hives, each section of the registry. And this stores all the configuration information for your system, for Windows, stores information about the logged in user. Your application information is stored in here, a huge wealth of configuration details. The right side of the screen will be a breakdown of the things that we see in these hives. For instance, if I click on HKey local machine, you'll notice I just click some plus signs next to a number of these pieces, and I just choose a couple of these. You'll see that it puts other information onto the right side. I'm able to add information to the hive, and I'm able to add information onto my right side options by clicking the right mouse button, choosing New, and then choosing exactly the type of information I'd like to add. Would I like to add a new key? Those are those folders that we see. Or would I like to add a value underneath the key, a string value, a binary value, a D-word value, multi-string value, or expandable string value? Now, the exact value and type that you would add would be in the information that you receive from technical support. You can see if you flip through a number of these pieces, some of these devices and options may have multiple keys on the right side, and some of them may be different kinds of keys depending on the device that you've chosen, such as a D-word or an SZ. So depending on the option that you have and what's chosen is what you're going to add into the registry. You have to be very specific here. You can't mix these up. So if it says to add a D-word key, you have to make sure you add a D-word key and that it's not some type of string key or anything else, or else this option that you put in here isn't going to work. So make sure you have a backup. Under the File pull-down menu, there is an option to both import and export information. And you can do that very easily. You choose the registry file you'd like to save it to. You select the branch inside of the registry that you'd like to save. And it saves that entire section out into a file that if you wanted to recover from, you just double-click and it loads that registry section right back in again. It's almost foolproof in the way that that works. And it's really worth taking a few extra steps to make sure you have a backup of the registry before you start to change anything major. If you've ever been working with a program in Windows and that program crashes for some reason, there was something in the development, the programming of that application that caused it to fail, you may see a message like this, which says that this program has encountered a problem and needs to close. We're sorry for the inconvenience. And then it tells you that you can send an error report to Microsoft. And there's some options in here that talks about the data that this error report contains and why you should even report this to Microsoft. Well, you should know that this information is sent along to Microsoft, and they do look at these problems to help resolve some of these issues, not only with the Windows operating system, but perhaps with the applications that are using Windows as well. Real people are looking through this information. There's an automated process that consolidates these things, rolls them up. There's a group of people that are dedicated to looking at these error reports and helping to resolve these problems. This entire error reporting process is integrated into Windows. So this makes it very easy if you ever run into an issue and you really think there's a problem with either Windows or the application you're using, and it's not something that you did or that you know about, click this send error report message. It's going to send that information off, perhaps in an update, a patch that comes out, or the new version of the application that's released. The problem that you had may be resolved. In review, we've looked at all kinds of problems, issues from booting, issues starting up our Windows process. And then once we were inside of Windows, we looked at the event viewer, how we could use the registry to solve issues, and how the Windows error reporting can help make the applications that we use even better. For more A+ videos, to participate in our message boards and much more, you can visit our website, freeaplus.com.